My name is Princess Noor al-Hadid. I was tied to a railway by my own husband because I could not give him children. He believed the problem was me. He believed my body had failed him, and for that he decided I should die. I was 25 years old when my life was supposed to end on cold steel tracks in the middle of the Saudi desert. I was born into royalty, raised in palaces, surrounded by wealth that most people only see in dreams. But none of that could save me when my worth was reduced to one thing: my womb. In my world, a woman is not measured by her heart, not by her loyalty, not by her love. She is measured by the sons she produces. When I married my husband, one of the richest royal men in the kingdom, he expected a dynasty, a legacy of princes, a bloodline that would rule long after his death. I was chosen to be the woman who would give him that future. But month after month, year after year, I did not become pregnant. The doctor said nothing was wrong. The specialist found no disease. The test showed no failure. But in Saudi Arabia, a man is never infertile. A prince is never weak. A royal bloodline is never questioned. So the blame became mine. They said I was cursed. They said I was defective. They said I brought shame to his name. My husband stopped calling me his wife. He started calling me his mistake. And one night, he decided that mistakes should be erased. He told me we were going for a drive. Instead, he took me into the desert, to a place where trains pass at full speed, to a place where no one would hear me scream, to a place where my life could disappear without a trace. They dragged me from the car. They tied my wrists. They bound my ankles. They forced my body onto the railway. And then my husband looked down at me and said, "If you cannot give me children, you do not deserve to live." Then he walked away and left me there, waiting for the sound of death on steel. The desert was silent after they left. No engines, no voices, no footsteps, only the wind moving over the sand and the faint vibration of the rails beneath my back. My wrists burned where the rope cut into my skin. My ankles were tied so tightly that I could no longer feel my feet. The metal beneath me was cold, even though the desert air was still warm from the day. Every breath felt heavy. Every heartbeat echoed in my ears. I tried to move. I couldn't. I tried to scream. My throat was dry. My voice broke into nothing. Above me, the sky was turning deep blue. The first stars were appearing. Somewhere far away, I could hear the distant call to prayer drifting from a village beyond the dunes. All my life, I had prayed 5 times a day. I had fasted. I had bowed. I had memorized the verses. But lying on those rails, waiting to be crushed, none of those prayers had saved me. I thought of my childhood. I thought of my mother brushing my hair in the morning. I thought of the gardens inside our palace, where fountains sang softly at night. I thought of the girl I once was, who believed love was real and marriage was protection. Tears ran down the sides of my face and disappeared into the sand. "So, this is how it ends," I whispered. "Not in a palace, not surrounded by servants, not in a hospital bed, but alone, tied like an animal, waiting for a train." The ground began to tremble. At first I thought it was my heart, but then I felt it again, a deep vibration traveling through the steel beneath me. A train was coming. Far away I heard the horn, long, low, unstoppable. Panic flooded my body. I pulled against the ropes until my skin tore. I kicked with all the strength I had left. I screamed into the empty desert. No one came. The horn sounded again, closer now. The vibration grew stronger. The rails hummed beneath my spine. I could feel the weight of the machine rushing toward me from miles away. I closed my eyes. I did not want to see my death. In that moment I did not cry to Allah. I did not recite verses. I did not beg for forgiveness. I whispered the only prayer my soul could still form. God, if you are real, please save me. The wind suddenly stopped. The desert went silent. And then the air around me changed. It became heavy, not with fear, but with something I had never felt before. A presence, a power, a warmth that wrapped around my body like invisible arms. I opened my eyes. Light filled the desert. Not the light of the moon, not the light of a car, not the light of fire. This light was alive. It surrounded me. It covered the tracks. It shone brighter than the stars. It did not hurt my eyes, even though it was blinding. And then I saw him. A man stood beside the rails. His feet touched the sand, but he did not leave footprints. His clothes moved in the wind, but the wind did not touch him. His face was strong and gentle at the same time. His eyes looked into mine like he had known me forever. The train horn sounded again, but he did not turn around. He looked only at me. "Do not be afraid," he said. His voice was calm, steady, full of authority. I knew who he was, even though I had never read the Bible, even though I had never entered a church, even though I had never spoken his name before. My heart knew. "Jesus," I whispered. He knelt beside me. The light followed him. The desert itself seemed to bow. "I have seen your tears, Noor," he said. "I have heard every prayer you cried in the dark. I know what they did to you. And I have come to bring you life." The train was seconds away now. The horn screamed through the night. The rails shook violently beneath me. Jesus placed his hand on the ropes around my wrists. They fell apart, not cut, not untied. They turned to dust. My ankles came free. I gasped and rolled off the tracks just as the train thundered past, its wind tearing at my clothes, its wheels screaming against the steel where my body had been only moments before. The desert exploded with noise, and then silence again. The train disappeared into the distance. The tracks were empty. I was alive. I lay in the sand, shaking, crying, unable to breathe. Jesus stood above me. "You are not barren," he said. "You are not cursed. You are not worthless." He reached down and lifted me to my feet. "You are mine." The light slowly faded. The desert returned. The stars remained. But he was gone. Only the wind moved across the sand. And I knew with every part of my soul, my life no longer belonged to a prince. It belonged to Christ. They found me at sunrise. Not my husband, not the guards who had tied me, but a patrol from a nearby station that had seen movement near the tracks. I was sitting in the sand, still shaking, my hands covered in dust, my clothes torn, my eyes swollen from crying. When they asked what had happened, I could not speak. My mouth opened, but no words came. Because, how do you explain that a man made of light stepped between you and death? They took me back to the palace. By the time I arrived, my husband was already waiting. His face was calm, too calm. He dismissed the guards and closed the doors. "You survived," he said, not as a question, not with relief, but with irritation. I said nothing. He walked around me slowly, studying my bruises, the cuts on my wrists, the dust in my hair. "You embarrassed me," he said. "You failed even at dying properly." That was the moment I understood something. He had never loved me, not even a little. To him, I was not a wife. I was an investment that had not produced returns. From that day on, the palace became my prison. I was watched constantly. My phone was taken, my internet access cut. 2 female guards were placed outside my bedroom door. I was not allowed to leave the palace grounds without escort. They told the family I had suffered a nervous breakdown. They told the servants I was unstable. They told the doctors I was hysterical. But the truth was simple. They were afraid that someone would find out what he had done, afraid that a royal woman had been tied to a railway, afraid that shame would reach the wrong ears. My husband avoided me. He no longer looked at me. He spoke to me only through servants. When he did enter the room, his eyes were full of resentment. "You belong to me," he said once, "and I decide when your life ends." At night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment at the tracks, the light, the voice, the touch that broke the ropes. I could still feel his presence. I did not understand who Jesus was. I did not know his story, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was real, and he had saved me. For the first time in my life, I was not afraid of a prince. I was afraid of losing him. In Saudi society, infertility is not seen as a medical condition. It is seen as a verdict, a judgment written over a woman's life. From the moment a bride enters her husband's house, the clock begins to tick. Every month without pregnancy becomes a question. Every year becomes suspicion. And after a certain point, it becomes shame. In our culture, a woman's womb is her currency, her honor, her proof of worth. When I first failed to conceive, people were gentle. "It will come," they said. "Be patient. Allah opens the womb in His time." But patience disappears quickly in royal households. By the second year, the tone changed. Doctors were summoned from Riyadh, Dubai, London. Men in white coats examined my body like a broken instrument. They spoke in medical language, but their eyes judged me. "She is healthy. There is no defect. Everything is normal," which meant only one thing. The problem had to be me. In Saudi Arabia, a man is never infertile, a prince is never questioned, a royal bloodline is never flawed. So the blame settled on my shoulders like a sentence. My mother-in-law stopped greeting me. My sisters-in-law stopped inviting me to tea. The palace women whispered when I walked past. I heard the word often, barren. It followed me through the halls like a shadow. Servants began bringing me herbal drinks and strange tonics. Old women from respected families were called to pray over me. They burned incense in my bedroom and tied red threads around my wrists. "Your womb is closed," one of them said. "There is a spiritual blockage. You have offended Allah." At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like my body had betrayed me. I prayed harder. I fasted longer. I cried on my prayer mat until my eyes burned, but nothing changed. My husband grew colder with each passing month. His disappointment turned into irritation. His irritation turned into contempt. "You were chosen for a purpose," he said one night. "You were not chosen to be empty." He stopped touching me, stopped calling me his wife. He began referring to me as the woman. When guests visited the palace, he would seat me far from him. When business partners asked about his future heirs, he changed the subject. I became an embarrassment. One evening, during a family gathering, his uncle laughed and said, "Perhaps your bride was not built for motherhood." The men smiled. My husband said nothing. That silence burned deeper than any insult. In royal families, a woman who cannot conceive is quietly replaced. Another wife is brought in, a younger body, a fresh womb, a new chance at sons. I began hearing rumors. "He is looking for another bride. Her family has strong blood. Her mother had 7 sons." They paraded these women through our social circle, tall, young, fertile brides in waiting. I was forced to sit at dinners where my husband openly admired them. I smiled, because wives do not show pain. Inside, something was breaking. I began to fear for my life. In our history, women who fail their husbands disappear. They are sent away, locked away, forgotten. Sometimes they die in accidents. No one asks questions. I remembered the cold steel of the railway. I remembered the ropes cutting into my wrists. I remembered my husband's eyes when he said, "There is no place for a barren woman in my bloodline." That night was not a mistake. It was a message. I was living on borrowed time. One evening I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. I placed my hands on my stomach and whispered, "Why was I created like this?" For the first time, a strange thought entered my mind. What if I am not cursed? What if I am not broken? What if God sees me differently than these men? And in that moment, I remembered the light, the voice, the man who stood between me and death. Jesus! I did not know his story. I did not know his name properly, but I knew he had looked at me with compassion when no one else did. That night I knelt on my prayer rug, but I did not pray the prayers I had been taught. I whispered into the silence, "Jesus, if you saved me from death, please save me from this life." And for the first time in years, my heart felt hope. There are books you are told never to open, and then there are books you are never even supposed to see. In Saudi Arabia, the Bible is forbidden. Possessing it is a crime. Reading it is apostasy. And apostasy, for a Muslim woman married into royalty, is a death sentence. But God has a way of placing light exactly where darkness believes it is strongest. I found the Bible by accident, or what the world would call an accident. It was hidden in a forgotten storage wing of the palace, a place where old furniture, broken mirrors, and abandoned belongings from foreign advisors were kept. The royal family had once hosted diplomats, engineers, and business partners from Europe and America. When their contracts ended, many of their possessions were left behind. One afternoon, I was walking with a female guard through the storage corridor when I noticed a small black book sitting alone on a dusty shelf. No gold, no ornament, no Arabic calligraphy, just 2 words pressed into the leather, "Holy Bible." My heart began to race. I did not know why. I had never touched one before. I had never even seen one. But something deep inside me recognized it, like hearing a voice you forgot you once knew. I waited. That night, when the guards changed shifts and the palace grew quiet, I returned alone. My hands shook as I reached for it. I hid it beneath my abaya and carried it back to my room like contraband. If anyone discovered it, I would be finished. But I could not leave it behind. That night I locked my door and sat on the edge of my bed with the book in my hands. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Fear battled curiosity. Training battled hunger. Every warning I had ever been taught echoed in my mind. This book is dangerous. This book corrupts. This book leads to hell. But then I remembered the railway. I remembered the light. I remembered the voice that had called me by name. I opened it. The pages smelled old. The paper was thin and yellowed. The English was difficult, but I understood enough. I turned page after page until I reached the words printed in red. The words of Jesus, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." My breath caught. That was me, weary, burdened, crushed under a life I never chose. I read the sentence again and again. Tears blurred the page. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. No imam had ever spoken like this. No scholar had ever offered rest. No prayer had ever felt personal. This voice was different. It did not command. It invited. Night after night, I read in secret. I hid the Bible beneath my mattress during the day and pulled it out when the palace fell silent. I memorized verses quickly, afraid that one day it would be taken from me. I read about Jesus healing the barren. I read about him touching the untouchable. I read about him defending women condemned by men. And slowly, something inside me came alive. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not as a womb, not as a wife, not as a possession, but as a soul. I began to pray to him, not the prayers I had memorized, not the words I was taught, but my own. Jesus, I whispered, I don't know you, but I believe you saved me. If you are real, please stay with me. Please don't leave me alone in this palace. Sometimes I felt his presence like warmth in my chest. Sometimes peace would wash over me so suddenly that I would have to sit down. I was changing, and I knew it, which meant I was in danger, because in Saudi Arabia, a woman who follows Jesus is not just a sinner. She is an enemy, and enemies do not live long. In Saudi Arabia, a woman's value is written before she is even born. Not in ink, not on paper, but in expectation. From the moment a girl takes her first breath, her future is already decided. She will grow into a bride. She will serve her husband. She will carry sons. She will extend a bloodline. Everything else is decoration. Education is decoration. Beauty is decoration. Intelligence is decoration. But motherhood is purpose. When a woman cannot fulfill that purpose, she becomes invisible. And when she becomes invisible, she becomes disposable. After my husband failed to kill me at the railway, something shifted inside the palace. No one spoke of that night, but everyone felt its shadow. Guards watched me more closely. Servants spoke in whispers. My movements were recorded. My meals were inspected. They were no longer protecting me. They were guarding a liability. My husband began bringing doctors into the palace at all hours. Men with briefcases and portable machines. Specialists who spoke in low voices behind closed doors. I was examined again and again. They measured my hormones. They counted my eggs. They tested my blood. Every test ended the same way. She is medically normal, which meant there was no excuse. If my body was capable of pregnancy and yet I did not conceive, then I was not just barren. I was disobedient in the eyes of God. That is what they believed. My mother-in-law began visiting my room without warning. She would sit across from me on the velvet sofa, her face carved from stone. "You are wasting my son's future," she said. "A man without heirs is nothing. You were brought into this family for one reason." Her words were calm, but her eyes were merciless. One afternoon, I was summoned to a family council. My husband sat at the head of the table. His brothers, uncles, and advisers surrounded him. I stood alone. They spoke about me as if I were not there. "She has had enough time. He needs a younger wife. The family cannot wait any longer. This embarrassment must be resolved." Resolved. As if I were a contract dispute. As if I were a broken machine. As if I were not a human being. My husband finally looked at me. "You have 1 year," he said. 1 year to prove your worth. No one asked what would happen if I failed. We all knew. In our world, unwanted women disappear. Sometimes they are sent to remote relatives. Sometimes they are locked away in private villas. Sometimes they die in accidents. And sometimes they are tied to railways. At night, I would lie awake listening to the palace breathe, the hum of generators, the footsteps of guards, the distant roar of traffic beyond the walls. I pressed my hand against my stomach and whispered, "Please, just one child. But my prayers were no longer directed toward the God of my childhood. They were directed toward the man who had saved my life. Jesus, I read his words again and again. Ask and it will be given to you. Nothing is impossible with God. Whoever believes in me will live. I did not know how faith worked. I did not know how miracles came. But I believed he was listening, and that belief was dangerous. Because if they ever discovered my Bible, if they ever heard me speak his name, if they ever knew my heart belonged to Christ, my death would be legal, my execution would be justified, my family would call it honor, my husband would call it necessity, and my country would call it justice. I was walking a line between two worlds, one built on fear, one built on grace, and I knew I would soon be forced to choose. Faith is dangerous in a palace, especially when that faith does not belong to the religion of the kingdom. Every camera, every guard, every servant, all of them are eyes, and eyes report. After finding the Bible, I lived in two worlds at once. By day, I was Princess Noor al-Hadid, the obedient wife, the silent woman, the royal possession who bowed her head and followed orders. By night, I became someone else, a seeker, a believer, a woman whispering prayers into the darkness. I learned to listen for footsteps in the corridor, to recognize the sound of each guard's boots, to memorize their shift changes, to hide the Bible inside the lining of my mattress where no one would think to look. Every night I knelt on my prayer rug, but I no longer faced Mecca. I faced the window, the sky, the same stars that had watched Jesus stand between me and death. I whispered his name, Jesus. The word felt forbidden on my tongue, but it felt alive. I prayed without formulas, without memorized lines, without fear of saying the wrong thing. I spoke to him like a daughter speaks to a father. I'm afraid. They want to replace me. They want to erase me. Please don't let me die like this. Sometimes I prayed for hours. Sometimes I only had the strength to whisper one word. Help! I read the Gospel slowly, carefully, like someone learning a new language of the soul. I read about barren women who conceived. I read about broken lives restored. I read about a God who touched lepers and defended prostitutes, a God who chose women when men discarded them. Every page felt like it was written for me. I began to memorize verses, knowing the book could be taken from me at any moment. I wrote scriptures on small pieces of paper and hid them inside my jewelry box. I carried his words with me like armor, but fear walked beside my faith. Because in Saudi Arabia, a woman who follows Jesus does not go to prison. She disappears. One night, I was praying when I heard the handle of my door move. I froze. My heart pounded so loud, I thought it would give me away. I slid the Bible under my pillow and sat up just as the door opened. Two female guards entered. "We are searching your room," one said. They began opening drawers, checking closets, looking under the bed. I sat still, my hands folded, my breathing slow. They lifted the mattress. My heart stopped, but they did not look inside the lining. They were searching for phones, letters, evidence of communication. They found nothing. When they left, my legs collapsed beneath me. I fell to the floor and pressed my face into the carpet. "Jesus," I whispered, "if you are with me, please protect me." And I felt it, a calm that did not belong to fear, a peace that did not come from safety, a presence. I was not alone. Days passed. The pressure grew. My husband's family demanded progress. He demanded results. His patience was ending. "You have shamed me long enough," he said one night. "Allah will not bless a disobedient woman." I wanted to scream that I was not disobedient. I was faithful, faithful to the man who saved my life, faithful to the God who had finally answered me. But I stayed silent, because silence is how women survive. I knew the time was coming. I could feel it in the way the palace watched me. I could hear it in the way my husband spoke. I could see it in the eyes of the guards. I was running out of time. That night I knelt again. Jesus, I whispered, if you saved me from the train, if you saved my soul, please save my future. I placed my hands on my stomach. Please let life grow here. And for the first time, I felt something different. Not pain, not emptiness, but hope. A quiet, trembling hope, as if heaven itself was listening. There is a moment when fear stops whispering and starts speaking clearly. For me, that moment came on a Thursday evening when the palace was filled with guests and laughter echoed through halls that had long felt like a tomb. My husband was hosting a business dinner. Powerful men from across the kingdom had come to discuss oil contracts and regional alliances. The tables were covered in silver dishes. The air smelled of cardamom and roasted lamb. Servants moved like shadows between the guests. I sat at the far end of the table, silent, invisible. One of the men raised a glass and said, "May Allah bless your house with strong sons." Everyone smiled. Everyone looked at me. My husband did not. His jaw tightened. His hand clenched around his cup. In that moment, I knew the patience was gone. Later that night, after the guests had left and the palace returned to its usual quiet tension, he summoned me to his private chamber. The guards closed the doors behind me. He stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. "You have failed me," he said, not angrily, not loudly, with certainty. "I gave you time. I gave you doctors. I gave you opportunity." He turned to face me. "You gave me nothing." I felt the room shrink around me. "I have been praying," I said softly. He laughed. "Your prayers mean nothing. Allah does not bless a woman who brings shame to her husband." I wanted to tell him about Jesus. I wanted to tell him about the railway, about the light, about the ropes turning to dust. But I knew better. Truth is dangerous in a house built on power. "I will take another wife," he continued, "a younger one, a fertile one, and you will be sent away." My heart pounded. "Where?" I asked. He walked closer. "So far that no one will remember your name." I understood what he meant. In royal families, exile is death. A woman alone has no protection, no voice, no future. I swallowed. "You promised I would be your only wife," I said. He stepped closer. "You promised me sons." That night I did not sleep. I sat on my bed with my Bible pressed against my chest, whispering prayers through tears. "Jesus, please don't let him do this. Please don't let me disappear. I am afraid." At dawn, I felt something shift, not in the palace, but in my body, a warmth, a strange, unfamiliar sensation. I placed my hand on my stomach and froze. For the first time in years, my body felt different, not empty, not silent, alive. I told no one, not the doctors, not the servants, not my husband. I did not dare hope. Hope had hurt me too many times. But that night, when I knelt to pray, I felt tears of gratitude instead of despair. "Jesus," I whispered, "if this is you, thank you." The next morning, my husband announced we were traveling. "Pack your things," he said. "We are going into the desert." My heart stopped. I remembered the railway, the ropes, the steel. "Why?" I asked. He looked at me with cold eyes. "There are matters to settle." I packed in silence. I hid my Bible inside my clothing. I whispered one last prayer before entering the car. "Jesus, walk with me." The gates opened. The desert swallowed the road, and I knew whatever awaited me beyond the dunes would decide my life or my death. The road into the desert feels endless when you know where it leads. The city disappeared behind us as the car moved deeper into the dunes. The sky was pale with early morning light. The horizon shimmered with heat. The silence inside the vehicle was thick enough to suffocate. My husband sat beside me, staring straight ahead. He did not look at me once. 2 guards followed us in a second vehicle. The same men. I recognized their faces. The ones who had dragged me across the sand. The ones who had tied my wrists. The ones who had left me to die. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my chest. I pressed my hand against my stomach. "Jesus," I whispered silently, "please don't let this be the end." The car slowed, then stopped. The railway stretched across the desert like a blade. The steel tracks cut through the sand exactly as I remembered. Cold, merciless, unforgiving. The same place. The same smell of metal and dust. My husband finally turned to me. "You had your chance," he said. "You wasted it." The guards opened the door. They pulled me out. I tried to stand, but my legs shook. The desert wind whipped my abaya around me. The sun was rising now, painting the sand in gold. It was beautiful, and it was where I was supposed to die. They dragged me toward the tracks. I screamed, not for help, for heaven. "Jesus," I cried, "please." One of the guards struck me across the face. "Be silent." They threw me down. The steel burned against my skin. I felt the rope wrap around my wrists again, then my ankles, then my waist. The same cold knots, the same cruelty. My husband stood above me. "There will be no miracle this time," he said. I looked into his eyes. There was no anger, only certainty. He believed he was right. He believed God was on his side. "You were given a name of light," he said, "but you brought only darkness into my house." I closed my eyes. The sound of the approaching train echoed across the desert. The horn cut through the air. The ground began to tremble. I whispered through tears, "Jesus, you saved me once. Please, don't let me die here." The vibration grew stronger. The rails hummed beneath my body. The horn screamed, "Closer, closer." I opened my eyes. The desert light changed. The sky dimmed. The wind stopped. And then I saw it, the same light, brighter than the sun, stronger than fear. It spread across the tracks, wrapping around me like fire that did not burn. The guards froze. My husband stepped back. "What is this?" he whispered. The train was seconds away. The ground shook violently. The horn tore through the air. And then silence. The train slowed, then stopped. Its wheels screeched against the steel. The engineer leaned out of the cabin, shouting in confusion. The desert was filled with light, and in that light he stood. Jesus! Between me and death. He placed his hand on the ropes. They fell away like ash. I rolled off the tracks just as the train came to a complete halt. The guards fell to their knees. My husband staggered backward. Jesus turned to him. "You have no authority over her," he said. "She belongs to me." The light faded. The desert returned. The train stood silent. The men stared in terror. I lay in the sand, trembling, alive, again. I stood up, and for the first time I was not afraid, because I knew no prince on earth is stronger than the King of Heaven. The desert had never been silent like that before. A train stopped on open rails is not normal. In Saudi Arabia, trains do not stop unless something is wrong. Schedules are sacred, roads are fixed, steel obeys time. But that morning, time itself had bowed. The engine stood frozen. The dust hung in the air. The guards were on their knees. My husband stood pale and trembling, staring at the empty space where the light had just vanished. No one spoke, no one moved. The train engineer climbed down slowly, his eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" he asked. No one answered, because how do you explain that heaven stepped onto your railway? I stood barefoot in the sand, my heart pounding, my clothes torn, my hands still shaking, but I was alive, not because men spared me, not because my husband changed his mind, because Jesus had come again. One of the guards whispered, "This place is cursed." My husband finally found his voice. "Get her in the car," he said. His authority had cracked. They did not drag me this time. They did not touch me. They looked at me like they were afraid. The drive back to the palace was silent. No one spoke. The guards kept glancing at me in the mirror. My husband stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth would break. I placed my hand over my stomach. "Thank you, Jesus," I whispered inside my heart. At the palace gates, servants froze when they saw my condition. Dust on my clothes, blood on my wrists, my face swollen from the blow. They did not ask questions. Royal households survive by silence. I was taken to my room. Doctors were called. My husband ordered that no one speak of what happened. "This never happened," he said. But fear had entered the palace, and fear spreads faster than truth. That night I locked my door and collapsed onto my prayer rug. I pressed my face into the carpet and wept, not from fear, from gratitude. "Jesus," I whispered, "you came again. You stood between me and death again. You did not leave me." For the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to be protected, not by guards, not by walls, not by power, but by God Himself. The next morning, my husband did not come to breakfast. His mother did. She sat across from me with eyes full of suspicion. "You were seen near the railway," she said. "There was an incident with a train. Men are talking." I said nothing. She leaned closer. "Do not bring shame on this family." Shame. That word again. But I was no longer afraid of shame. I had seen glory. The palace atmosphere changed. Guards avoided my eyes. Servants whispered when I passed. My husband stopped looking at me entirely. But something else changed too. The doctors came again. They ran more tests. They took more blood. They brought ultrasound machines. And then one morning a female doctor entered my room with trembling hands. She closed the door behind her. She looked at me like she was afraid. "You are pregnant," she whispered. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "There is a heartbeat." My knees gave out. I sank to the floor. Tears poured from my eyes, not tears of fear, tears of wonder. Life! After years of emptiness, after years of humiliation, after a death sentence on steel tracks. Life! I placed both hands on my stomach. "Jesus," I whispered, "you did this." The doctor stared at me. "Do not tell anyone yet," she said. "Your husband must not know until we are sure." But I already knew, because no prince had opened my womb. No doctor had healed me. No palace had saved me. Heaven had. In royal households, nothing stays secret for long. Walls have ears. Servants talk. Doctors report. And miracles make noise. For 3 weeks I carried the knowledge of my pregnancy alone. I moved through the palace like a ghost, hiding my trembling hands, hiding my tears, hiding the joy that burned inside my chest. Every morning I woke up and placed my hand on my stomach. Life, a heartbeat, a promise. I whispered to Jesus before my feet touched the floor, "Thank you." But fear walked beside my gratitude, because in my world a child does not belong to the mother. A child belongs to the Father's name. And I knew what my husband had tried to do to me. I knew how close I had come to death. And I did not trust his sudden silence. The first sign that the palace knew came from the servants. They began watching me differently. Women whispered behind doors. Guards followed me more closely. My meals were prepared separately and inspected. Then my mother-in-law returned. She entered my room without knocking, her eyes sharp as knives. "Sit," she commanded. I obeyed. She studied my face, my posture, my breathing. "You are hiding something," she said. I said nothing. She leaned forward. "The doctor reported irregularities in your blood work." My heart pounded. "You will tell me the truth." I closed my eyes. "I'm pregnant." For a moment the room was silent. Then her breath caught. She stood so fast her chair scraped across the marble floor. "Say it again." "I'm carrying a child." Her hands trembled. "A son," she whispered. "It is too early to know." Her eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Hope. The news spread through the palace like fire. My husband was summoned from a business meeting. Doctors were flown in from Europe. Ultrasound machines arrived. They examined me like a treasure chest that had finally opened. When they confirmed the heartbeat, my husband stood frozen. He stared at the screen, his jaw tightened, his hands clenched. "This is impossible," he said. I looked at him. "It is a miracle." He turned to me slowly. "A prince is not born from miracles," he said. "He is born from blood." The doctors confirmed again. "Healthy fetus, strong heartbeat, no abnormalities." The palace erupted. Women ululated in celebration. Servants bowed. The family congratulated him. I was finally useful again. My husband ordered a feast. He announced my pregnancy at a royal gathering. Men congratulated him. Women touched my belly. Blessings were spoken over my womb. But no one asked me how I felt. I sat on a golden chair while strangers praised my body. "You redeemed yourself," one of his uncles said. "You saved the bloodline." Saved. As if I had been drowning. As if my life had only just begun to matter. That night, my husband entered my room. He stood over me. "You will give me a son," he said. "You will restore my honor." I looked up at him. "This child belongs to God." His face darkened. "Do not speak like that." I placed my hand over my heart. "Jesus saved my life. He saved this child." The air changed. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" I stood. "You tried to kill me. Twice." And he stood between me and death. For the first time, fear crossed his face. "You are mad." "No," I said. "I am free." His hand rose. The guards entered. "Watch her," he said. "She is unstable." I knew then. The child would not protect me. It would only make me more valuable and more dangerous. That night I knelt on my prayer rug. "Jesus," I whispered, "they will not let me go. They want my child. Please show me the way." And deep inside my soul I felt an answer. "You will not raise this child in chains." From the moment my pregnancy was announced, my body no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the bloodline. Doctors came weekly. Nurses followed me everywhere. My meals were measured. My sleep was monitored. My movements were recorded. I was no longer a wife. I was an incubator. The palace treated my womb like a vault that held the future of an empire. My husband began speaking of the child as if it were already his property. "My son will rule after me. My son will carry my name. My son will strengthen our house." He did not say our child. He said my son. And in his eyes I saw something colder than ambition, ownership. I was moved to a different wing of the palace, a guarded suite with reinforced doors and constant surveillance. The windows did not open, the curtains never moved. They said it was for my protection. I knew it was a cage. At night I placed my hands on my belly and whispered to my unborn child. "You are loved," I said. "You are wanted. You are not owned." I prayed over him in secret. "Jesus, please protect my child. Please let him live free. Please don't let them turn him into a weapon." My husband visited me less. When he did, he spoke only of legacy. "You will give birth in the Royal Hospital," he said. "The doctors will decide everything. The child will be raised by the family." I felt ice in my chest. "What about me?" I asked. "You are the mother," he replied. "Your role ends at birth." That night I cried until my pillow was wet. I was carrying life inside me, and they were already taking him away. The fear returned, the same fear I had felt on the railway, the same fear of being erased. One afternoon my mother-in-law entered my room with two women I did not recognize. They wore expensive abayas and carried leather folders. "These are family advisors," she said. "They will prepare you for your duty." Duty. The word tasted bitter. They spoke of contracts, of inheritance, of guardianship. They explained that if anything happened to me, the child would remain with the family. They spoke of arrangements, of contingency, of silence. I understood what they were doing. They were preparing for my disappearance. That night I pressed my hands against my stomach and whispered, "Jesus, I cannot protect him here. They will never let us go. They will never let him be free." I opened my Bible. I read about Moses, a child born under a death sentence, hidden in a basket, placed in God's hands. I wept. "Show me what to do," I prayed. 2 days later, something happened that changed everything. A new nurse arrived. Her name was Miriam. She was Filipino, quiet, gentle. She wore a small silver cross hidden beneath her uniform. When she checked my blood pressure, she looked into my eyes and whispered in English, "Jesus is with you." My breath caught. I stared at her. She squeezed my hand. "God sent me." That night she returned. She locked the door. She knelt beside my bed and she prayed over me, out loud, in the name of Jesus. For the first time, I was not alone. She told me about an underground network, Christian workers, safe routes, refugee houses. "There is a way out," she said, "but it will be dangerous." I placed my hand over my belly. "I will do anything to save my child." She nodded. "Then God will open the doors." That night I slept for the first time in weeks, because hope had returned. And hope is stronger than fear. Hope is dangerous, not because it weakens you, but because it gives you something to lose. The moment Miriam whispered the name of Jesus in my room, the palace no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a battlefield. I was no longer waiting to be erased. I was preparing to run. Miriam moved through the palace like a shadow. She cleaned rooms, delivered medicine, changed IV bags. No one paid attention to her. In royal households, servants are invisible, but invisibility is power. She began bringing me news, whispered updates, routes, names, safe houses. "There are Christians everywhere," she said. "Filipinos, Indians, Ethiopians, Indonesians. Most people think Saudi Arabia has no church, but the church is hidden." I listened. Every word burned into my memory. "There is a driver who works for a catering company," she continued. "He delivers food to royal events. His cousin is a believer. He has helped women escape before." My heart pounded. "When?" "Soon. Before your pregnancy shows." I looked down at my stomach. Life was growing inside me. Every day made escape harder. Guards watched me constantly. Cameras followed my movements. My meals were recorded. My sleep was monitored. They said it was for my safety. But I knew the truth. They were protecting an asset, not a woman. We began preparing in secret. Miriam brought me plain clothes hidden beneath medical supplies, a black abaya, a simple hijab, flat shoes. She smuggled a small phone into my room. "This is not connected to the palace network," she said. "You will only use it once." I memorized numbers, routes, timing. The plan was simple: disguise, leave with staff, transfer vehicles, disappear. But simple plans in royal households require miracles. One mistake, one camera, one suspicious guard, and we would both be dead. I prayed constantly. "Jesus, open the doors. Jesus, blind the eyes. Jesus, walk in front of me." I remembered the railway. I remembered the light. I remembered his voice. "You belong to me." I was no longer afraid of my husband. I was afraid of failing my child. One evening my husband announced a royal banquet. Hundreds of guests, security stretched thin, servants everywhere, controlled chaos. Miriam's eyes met mine across the room. Tonight, that was the signal. That night I dressed slowly. No jewelry, no perfume, no silk, just fabric. I hid my Bible inside my clothing. I kissed my prayer rug, and I whispered, "Jesus, if you want me free." Now is the time. The banquet filled the palace with music and voices. Guards were distracted. Cameras pointed toward entrances. Servants rushed between kitchens and halls. Miriam met me in the medical corridor. She handed me a tray. "Walk like you belong," she whispered. I lowered my eyes. We moved past guards, past doors, past checkpoints. My heart pounded in my throat. We reached the service exit. A man in a catering uniform waited beside a truck. He did not look at me. He only said, "Get in." I climbed into the back among crates of bottled water. The door closed. The engine started. The truck rolled forward. I pressed my hands against my stomach. We were moving, leaving, escaping. For the first time in my life, I was not being taken somewhere. I was choosing where to go. The palace gates opened. The truck passed through. No alarms, no shouting, no sirens. The desert road swallowed us. I closed my eyes. Tears streamed down my face. "Jesus," I whispered, "we are free." The truck smelled of dust and diesel. Crates of bottled water rattled around me as the wheels hit the uneven desert road. Every bump sent a shock through my body. I pressed my hands against my stomach, whispering prayers into the dark. "Jesus, keep us safe. Jesus, hide us. Jesus, lead the way." I could hear voices in the cabin. The driver spoke softly into a radio. Another man answered. I did not understand the words, but I recognized the tone, urgency. We drove for nearly an hour before the truck slowed. The engine cut. The back doors opened. Moonlight spilled inside. A bearded man stood there. "Come," he said quietly. "We move fast now." Miriam was waiting beside him. I climbed down, my legs shaking. "This is Farid," she whispered. "He will take us to the next point." We walked across the sand to a dark SUV hidden behind a ridge. No lights, no markings. Farid opened the door. "Get in and cover your face," he said. We drove with the headlights off, guided only by the moon and the stars. The road twisted through dry valleys and rocky paths used only by smugglers and nomads. No checkpoints, no cameras, just desert. I thought of my palace, the marble floors, the velvet curtains, the guards with guns. All of it felt like another life. After 2 hours, we stopped at a small compound built from mud brick. A single light burned inside. An old man opened the door. He took one look at me and bowed his head. "God has sent you," he said. Inside, women wrapped me in blankets and gave me water. They touched my hands. They whispered prayers. You are safe for now, Miriam said. But your husband will search. As if summoned by her words, Farid's phone buzzed. His face hardened. They already know, he said. Your husband has sealed the palace. The guards are being questioned. My heart dropped. How long do we have? I asked. Hours, maybe less. We left before dawn, this time in a different vehicle, a pickup truck filled with sacks of grain. I lay hidden beneath them, breathing through fabric, counting every heartbeat. We crossed dirt roads, back routes, forgotten paths. Once, headlights appeared behind us. The driver swore. We turned sharply into a dry riverbed and killed the engine. The vehicle passed. I did not breathe until the sound faded. At midday, we reached a safe house near the border. A Christian family waited. They embraced me like a daughter. They prayed over my child. They fed me warm bread and tea. The father looked into my eyes. Once you cross, you cannot return, he said. I nodded. I already left. That night we moved again, this time on foot. The border lay ahead, a fence, cutting across the desert like a scar. Guards patrolled with flashlights. Cameras scanned the sand. We waited for clouds. When they covered the moon, we ran. Farid cut the fence. Miriam pushed me through. I felt the metal scrape my skin. Then hands pulled me forward. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs shook, until we collapsed in the sand on the other side. Farid laughed softly. You are free of the kingdom. I pressed my face into the sand. Thank you, Jesus, I whispered. In the distance, the lights of another country glowed. A new beginning, a life where my child would not be owned, where my faith would not be a death sentence, where I could finally breathe. I stood and looked back once, at the desert, at the land that tried to erase me. Then I turned toward the light and walked into my future. Crossing the border did not feel like freedom at first. It felt like standing on the edge of a world I had never known. Behind me lay the kingdom, the palaces, the guards, the bloodlines, the power that had tried to erase me. Ahead of me stretched a land of strangers, languages I barely understood, and a future I had never been allowed to imagine. We arrived at a small town just before sunrise. The streets were quiet. Shops were closed. The air smelled of bread and dust and morning dew. For the first time in my life, no one bowed when I entered a room. No one watched my every move. No one called me princess. They called me sister. The Christian family who received me lived in a modest house with peeling paint and a tiny garden. The mother wrapped me in a blanket and kissed my forehead. The father carried my bag. The children stared at me with wide eyes, whispering to each other. You are safe here, the woman said. This is God's house. I had lived in palaces, but I had never lived in a home. That night I slept without guards outside my door. No cameras, no surveillance, no fear of being dragged from my bed. When I woke up, sunlight poured through the window. Birds sang in the courtyard. Somewhere a radio played soft worship music. I placed my hand on my stomach. Life was still there, a miracle still growing. I wept. Miriam arrived later that day. She brought news. They are searching, she said. Your husband has issued orders. Your family claims you were kidnapped. I nodded. They will never stop, I said. She took my hands. But God has hidden you. That afternoon, I was taken to a small underground church, a simple room beneath a bakery, plastic chairs, a wooden cross on the wall, a handful of believers. When I entered, they stood, not because I was royalty, but because I was family. They sang in Arabic. They prayed for me. They laid hands on my belly. Lord, protect this child, they said. Let him be born in freedom. Let his life glorify your name. I had never been prayed for before, only prayed over. That night, the pastor asked me a question. What is your name? I hesitated. Princess Noor al-Hadid, I said. He shook his head gently. That is the name they gave you. Then he smiled. What is the name God gives you? I did not understand. He opened his Bible. In Christ, you are a new creation. The old has passed away. The new has come. Tears filled my eyes. For the first time, I saw myself not as property, not as a womb, not as a failure, but as a daughter. Your name is Noor, he said, and in Christ you truly are light. That night I was baptized, not in a palace bathroom, not in secret, but openly, in front of believers. When I came up from the water, they embraced me. You are home, they said. Weeks passed. My belly began to show. The child kicked. Life moved. I learned how to cook, how to shop, how to walk alone. Every small decision felt like a victory. Every day without fear felt like a miracle. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped waiting for footsteps in the hallway. I started laughing. I started dreaming. I started believing that my life was more than survival. One evening, I stood on the rooftop watching the sunset paint the sky gold. I whispered, Jesus, you gave me back my life. And in my heart, I heard his answer, now live it. The night my son was born, there were no guards outside the door, no doctors flown in from Europe, no royal announcements, no gold-covered bassinets. There was only a small hospital room, the sound of rain against the window, and a handful of women who held my hands and prayed. I had never been so afraid, and never so ready. For months I had carried him across borders, through deserts, into hiding. I had protected him with prayers and tears, and courage I never knew I possessed. Now it was time to let him breathe the air of a free world. The contractions began just after sunset. At first they felt like waves, strong, then fading, then strong again. Miriam sat beside me, counting my breathing. The midwife placed warm hands on my back. You are strong, she said. God is with you. I remembered another night, the railway, the steel, the train horn. I remembered Jesus standing between me and death. Jesus, I whispered, stand with me now. The pain grew, but I did not feel. Alone, women surrounded me. They spoke softly. They prayed in Arabic, Tagalog, English. When the final moment came, I cried out, not in fear, but in faith. And then I heard it, a cry, strong, alive, unafraid. They placed him on my chest, my son. His skin was warm, his fists curled against my heart. His eyes blinked open, searching the world. I pressed my lips to his forehead and wept. You are free, I whispered. No one owns you. No one will use you. You belong to God. The nurse smiled. He is healthy, she said. Very strong. I looked at his tiny hands and remembered the ropes that once bound mine. I remembered the man who said I did not deserve to live. I remembered the palace that tried to take everything from me. And I knew this child was heaven's answer. We named him Isa, Jesus. Not as a replacement for Christ, but as a reminder of the one who saved us. In the days that followed, women from the church brought food and blankets. They sang over him. They prayed for his future. The pastor came and held him in his arms. This child was born for freedom, he said. His life will testify of God's power. I held my son and watched the sun rise through the hospital window. I had once watched the sun rise over steel tracks, waiting to die. Now I watched it rise over my child. Life, hope, promise. That afternoon I walked outside for the first time as a mother. No abaya, no guards, no fear. I carried my son against my chest and felt the wind on my face. I laughed. People stared, not because I was royalty, but because I was radiant. I had crossed from death into life, from captivity into freedom, from silence into song. That night, as Isa slept beside me, I knelt by the bed. Jesus, I whispered, thank you for my life. Thank you for my son. Thank you for choosing me. And in the quiet of that room, I knew the story that began on steel tracks would now be told in lullabies. Freedom has a cost, and in my world that cost had a number. I learned about the price on my head 3 weeks after Isa was born. It was Miriam who brought the news. She entered the room quietly, closed the door behind her, and sat beside me without speaking. Her face told me everything before her mouth ever could. "They are looking for you," she said softly. "Your husband has hired private investigators. Your family has declared you dead." I held Isa closer. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means they will not stop," she said. "And it means you must disappear completely. In royal culture, reputation is more valuable than truth. My family could not admit that a princess had escaped. They could not admit that a royal woman had rejected her husband. They could not admit that one of their own had chosen Jesus. So they told the world I had died. A sudden illness, a tragic complication, a private burial. The kingdom mourned, but behind the scenes the search began. They wanted my child. They wanted my silence. They wanted my life. The pastor called a meeting. We sat in a small room beneath the church, Isa sleeping in my arms. "There is a network," he said. "Christian families across several countries. Safe houses, new identities." I looked down at my son. "I will go wherever God leads," I said. Within days we moved again. New city, new names, new papers. I was no longer Princess Noor al-Hadid. I became simply Noor, a refugee, a mother, a believer. We lived quietly. I learned how to shop in markets, how to cook with borrowed recipes, how to live without servants. I cleaned my own floors, washed my own clothes, carried my own groceries. And for the first time in my life, I felt dignity. But fear followed me like a shadow. Every knock on the door made my heart race. Every strange car made me hold Isa tighter. Every unfamiliar face made me pray. "Jesus, hide us! Jesus, cover us! Jesus, keep my son safe!" One evening, a man approached me in the market. He spoke Arabic. He used my old title, Princess. My blood ran cold. I turned. He smiled. Then I ran. I ran through narrow streets, clutching Isa against my chest. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until my legs shook. I did not stop until I reached the church. The pastor locked the doors. "They found you," he said. That night we left again. I learned that safety is not a place. It is a promise. And that promise had a name. Jesus. We moved across borders, changed homes, changed languages. But my faith did not change. I taught Isa to pray before he could speak. I sang worship songs while rocking him to sleep. I told him the story of the man of light who saved his mother on the railway. "You were born because Jesus loves us," I whispered. And every time fear whispered that we would be found, faith answered louder. Freedom is not something you arrive at. It is something you learn. When Isa was old enough to walk, he would run through the small courtyard of our apartment, chasing birds and laughing as if the world had never tried to kill his mother. Sometimes I would watch him and forget where we came from. Then a memory would return. Steel tracks, ropes on my wrists, a prince who said I did not deserve to live. And I would pull him closer. Isa grew up without knowing palaces, without knowing guards, without knowing that his bloodline once ruled oil fields and empires. To him, our life was normal. A small kitchen, a simple table, a mother who cooked and sang while she cleaned. He did not call anyone Your Highness. He did not bow his head in fear. He did not know what it meant to be owned. He knew only love. Every night before bed, we knelt together. He would fold his tiny hands and close his eyes. Jesus, he would say, thank you for Mommy. Thank you for food. Thank you for birds. Sometimes I would cry as I listened, because I had once knelt on a prayer rug, begging not to die. Now I knelt beside my son, thanking God for life. I told Isa stories, not fairy tales, testimonies. I told him about the desert, about the railway, about the light. I told him how Jesus stood between me and death. Did he have a sword? Isa asked once. No, I smiled. He had love, and that was stronger, much stronger. As Isa grew, I taught him that strength does not come from power. It comes from truth. I taught him that a man is not measured by how many people obey him, but by how many people he protects. I taught him that women are not possessions. They are daughters of God. And I taught him that his life was not an accident. It was a miracle. Sometimes fear would return. I would hear Arabic spoken on the street, and my heart would race. I would see a luxury car and feel my breath catch. But Isa would take my hand. Mommy, he would say, Jesus is with us. And I would remember I was no longer alone. We attended church every Sunday, a small community of refugees and believers from many nations, people who had lost homes, lost families, lost everything, but had found Christ. Isa loved the music. He would clap and dance in the aisles. The women would lift him into their arms and call him the miracle boy. He was born from death, they said. He will walk in life. As he grew older, I enrolled him in school. The first day, I walked him to the gate. He turned and waved. See you later, Mommy. I stood there long after he disappeared inside. Once a woman who did not choose her life was now choosing her son's future. At night, when Isa slept, I would open my Bible. The same words that saved me, the same voice that called me by name. I would whisper, Jesus, thank you for trusting me with him. And I knew the world that tried to erase me had failed, because my son would grow up free. There are moments when you realize your life no longer belongs to fear. Not because danger is gone, not because the past is erased, but because love has rewritten your future. For me, that moment came on an ordinary morning. Isa was eating bread at the kitchen table. Sunlight streamed through the window. Birds sang on the power lines outside. The world moved quietly, gently, as if nothing terrible had ever tried to claim us. I watched my son and thought of the railway, the steel, the ropes, the train horn cutting through the desert. I remembered the man who said I did not deserve to live, and I remembered the man who stood between me and death, Jesus. My life no longer belonged to a palace. It no longer belonged to a prince. It no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to Christ. I used to believe that power lived in bloodlines. That identity came from family names. That destiny was written by men with money and influence. I was wrong. Destiny is written by God. I was born into royalty, but I was reborn into freedom. I was raised to be silent, but Christ gave me a voice. I was taught that my worth lived in my womb, but Jesus showed me that my worth lives in his love. Today I live quietly. I do not wear silk. I do not walk with guards. I do not sleep behind locked palace doors. I walk freely. I laugh loudly. I worship openly. And every day I choose faith over fear. There are still risks. There are still threats. There are still people who would silence me if they could. But I am not afraid, because I have already faced death, and death lost. I share my story with women who think they are trapped, women who believe they have no choice, women who believe their lives belong to someone else. I tell them, you are not owned, you are not forgotten, you are not invisible. There is a God who sees you. There is a Savior who will stand between you and destruction. There is a freedom no man can take. I speak in underground churches, refugee centers, hidden prayer rooms, living rooms where women gather in secret and whisper the name of Jesus like a treasure. I look into their eyes and I see myself, fearful, broken, waiting for rescue. And I tell them the truth. Jesus comes into deserts. He walks onto railways. He breaks ropes. He stops trains. And he calls you by name. Sometimes they ask me, do you ever miss your old life? The palaces, the wealth, the power. I smile. I traded gold for grace. I traded silk for salvation. I traded a throne for truth. And I would do it again. Because no palace ever held me the way Jesus does. No prince ever protected me the way Christ has. No kingdom ever gave me what heaven gave me. My son grows up knowing that his life is a miracle, that his mother was saved by God, that his story began on steel tracks and continued in grace. He knows that power is not found in domination. It is found in sacrifice. He knows that love is stronger than fear, and that no chain is stronger than Christ. If you are reading this and you feel trapped, if you feel powerless, if you believe your life belongs to someone else, hear me. You were created for freedom. You were born for more. And there is a Savior who is not afraid of deserts, railways, prisons, palaces, or death. His name is Jesus, and he is still saving lives. My name is Noor, once a princess owned by men, now a daughter of the King of Kings, and my life belongs to Christ.